Mama said no, but I did it anyway. Misbehavin'.
Preacher said don't. If you do, you're gonna pay.
Misbehavin'.
Running through the house with a pickle in my mouth. See us on the street, look at us outside waving. Just two little country kids outside misbehaving.
That's how we'll end the podcast.
Yeah, that's how we'll start and end. We'll bookend it, bookshelf it.
Ladies and gentlemen, we got it.
I've earned everything I've got. Yeah, good.
Mr. Gorbachev.
You didn't build that.
Mr. Gorbachev.
Yeah, good.
Tear down this wall.
What's your favorite president?
Tear down this wall.
I can see Russia from my house. Pokemon go to the polls.
Yeah, good.
Watch your country.
He did say well alive.
Hey party people, welcome to Chicken in Every Pod. I am one of your hosts, Kyle McCormick.
And I'm another one of your hosts, Lucia Fasano. And a little, what the cluck?
Hey, how about a...
Hey, what the cluckers, what the cluckies?
Hey, what the Cluckericans? We made that up. We're back. We're back for another hot new episode, straight off the press.
Hot off the press, we will be discussing the alien report that we alluded to in the last episode.
That's right.
The big one that Marco Rubio was like hinting at was coming soon. It came.
It came.
And it went.
And baby, it went. It's only 9 pages.
What
It's a
is
preliminary report.
Fallout Boy, because it Pete wins. What is this? Cheers? Because it...
George went?
George went.
Wow, that's a stretch. But before we get into that, so here's what we're talking about today. We're going to lay out a little roadmap for everybody.
Okay.
Going to lay out a little road.
No, I just want to
You
talk
want to do a
about
little
it.
road masonry? Let people know what
Absolutely not. No.
So here's what they're
we
in
just
for.
let them know what they're in for.
Okay. So, before we get into the alien report and also some stories about presidents and aliens, we're going to have a little, I guess a literal post-mortem, a little tribute to the recently deceased Mike Gravel.
Now, if you're like me, you may not have really heard of Mike Gravel until this most recent election. I mean, you may not have even heard of him, but if you were online, you may have heard of Mike Gravel being this old man who was letting millennials or Gen Z, just these
Like
young...
Gen Z Chapo Trap House fans.
Take over and sort of help run his campaign and run on
For
Twitter. And it was kind of called the Gravelanche.
Yeah.
And they ended up starting their own, the Gravel Institute, to sort of help enhance leftist issues.
The Gravel Institute, which was started in the wake of Mike Gravel's presidential campaign ending, because he didn't make it into the debates, the Gravel Institute is meant to be a left-wing response to PragerU. For those unaware, PragerU is a company started by conservative pundit Dennis Prager, who's actually a local radio host in LA, who's been doing conservative talk radio since the 90s. And what PragerU does is they do these slickly produced little videos that they put on Twitter and YouTube that are supposed to go viral to basically back up conservative historiography, conservative politics, and things like that.
Which is pretty clever.
It's a smart idea, which is why the Gravel Institute has co-opted it.
Yeah.
And they're instead having videos with Richard Wolff and Sam Cedar and stuff like that talking about left-wing issues.
Yeah, so if you just kind of learned about him, it's like, oh, wow, what a cool, weird guy, but what's his deal?
Well,
but now he's dead.
Right.
Because he was 91.
He was 91.
So...
cause of death being 91.
Yes.
A solid run. We can all respect it. And the truth about him is that he is indeed a cool, weird old man.
Yeah, so I didn't know about him, but of course Kyle knew all about him.
Of course. Well, actually, it's funny.
He's kind of a proto-Bernie.
Yeah.
Because he is older than Bernie.
Yeah. So, I actually first heard of Mike Gravel. He ran for president the first time in 2008.
I will remember you. It's been a long road without Mike Gravel, but we'll tell you all about it when you subscribe to the pod. We also saw the new Fast and Furious.
Right. It's a shame that Mike Gravel didn't suck, because you could have had a rhyme with, like, we'll tell you all about it when we see him in hell.
Yeah, but instead he's in heaven. And
that's right.
He's in pie in the sky, lefty
Yeah,
heaven.
that's right. He's in vegan heaven. But
Was
so,
he vegan?
No. I was trying to think of a lefty thing that would be in heaven, but kind of not very much fun.
Well, there'll be pie.
That's true. Heaven will be vegan when Dennis Kucinich gets there.
Yes.
Forces it to be.
Dennis Kucinich.
Dennis Kucinich. So yeah, in a way, Mike Gravel's a proto-Bernie. He's also kind of a Kucinich type. So I first heard about Mike Gravel when he ran for president in 2008, when he was kind of a proto-Bernie.
He ran for president in 2008?
You bet he did. He did not win or get particularly far, but the way I actually heard about him was I was a senior in high school in 2008, and I was taking my last ever math class, which was statistics. And we had to do a project where we had to poll the class on something. Mm-hmm. And I decided to poll the class on who they were supporting for president. Now, this was probably February of 2008, so it was during the primaries. Most people were, actually, it was probably split pretty down the middle about Republicans and Democrats. The Democrats were primarily supporting Obama or Clinton. Mm-hmm. There's one or two, like, Bill Richardson fans, which was weird. Republicans are mostly supporting McCain or Romney or Huckabee. Not really any Ron Pauleys in that class. Mm-hmm. But I remember one of the kids in that class was supporting Mike Gravel. And I was like, and this is like a normal kid. So I was like, who's that? I looked it up. And so Mike Gravel had been the senator from Alaska for quite a long time. He was not from Alaska, but he moved there and ran for Senate and won in the early 70s, I believe. And he became most famous for being the person who brought the Pentagon Papers, which were early leaks from leaker Daniel Ellsberg, showing basically malfeasance in Vietnam from the Pentagon. A proto-Snowden type, or Chelsea
Around
Manning.
when was this?
In the mid-70s.
Wow.
Yeah.
What year did Vietnam end?
I think that we have officially stopped combat operations around 75.
Okay.
It had been winding down before that, but I think it took until 75.
So he whistle blew it.
So he whistle blew a lot of the stuff there. I believe the knowledge of the My Lai massacre came to the Pentagon Papers.
Wow.
That may have been broken by Cy Hirsch, but it was all kind of in the same. The, in my opinion, not very good film, The Post, the Steven Spielberg movie, is about the Pentagon Papers.
Oh, okay.
Because they were published for the Washington Post.
Should have been called The Mike Gravel.
Yeah, he's not in the film. So what Mike
the fuck?
Well, so what Mike Gravel did was, in order to ensure that the Pentagon Papers stayed public, is he took the Senate floor and he read them. And all business on the Senate floor goes into the public record. It's all recorded. And so he just read them on the Senate floor.
That's so badass.
And entered all of this important information about what the military was doing into the public record permanently. That was kind of his biggest claim to fame. And in 2008, he ran... I may try to drop the audio in, because he ran for president in the Democratic primary.
I was going to ask you to.
Yeah. And during a debate, well, just listen. He's the guy that sounds old. I'll put it in right here.
He's the guy that sounds old. So so you're going to be listening to Mike Gravel on stage debating Hillary and Obama.
Yeah.
And I think there's a reason why everyone knows about Hillary and everyone knows about Obama. And this guy, basically, everything he said was true and came true.
Yeah.
And he was, up until recently,
a nobody.
A nobody.
Yeah.
You're right, I made that statement, but that's before I had a chance to stand with them three times. It's like going into the Senate. You know, the first time you get there, you're all excited. My God, how did I ever get here? Then about 6 months later, you say, how the hell did the rest of them get here? And I got to tell you, after standing up with them, some of these people frighten me. They frighten me. When you have mainline candidates that turn around and say that there's nothing off the table with respect to Iran, that's code for using nukes, nuclear devices. I got to tell you, I'm President of the United States. There will be no preemptive wars with nuclear devices. To my mind, it's immoral, and it's been immoral for the last 50 years as part of American foreign policy.
Let's use a little moderator discretion here. Senator Gravel, that's a weighty charge. Who on this stage exactly tonight worries you so much?
Well, I would say the top-tier ones. The top-tier ones. They've made statements. Oh, Joe, I'll include you, too. You have a certain arrogance. You want to tell the Iraqis how to run their country. I got to tell you, we should just plain get out. Just plain get out. It's their country. They're asking us to leave, and we insist on staying there. And why not get out? What harm is it going to do? Oh, you hear the statement, well, my God, the soldiers will have died in vain. The entire deaths of Vietnam died in vain. And they're dying in vain right this very second. You know what's worse than a soldier dying in vain is more soldiers dying in vain. That's what's worse.
Wow.
Wow, what a clip.
What a clip that we just listened to.
Oh, boy.
So he obviously crashed and burned the Democratic primary, and then he ran for the Libertarian Party nomination in 2008.
Wow.
Did not receive that either.
Mm-hmm.
But part of his goal with that was to kind of try to change
the two
what the
parties
Libertarian
system.
Party was.
Yeah.
Try to move it more towards like a left libertarian sort of thing.
Yeah, because as we've talked about on the show, like, libertarian doesn't mean just Republican light. You know?
It's more complicated.
More complicated, and you're doing a disservice to the women, the Native American activists that helped lead the libertarian movement, to erase them from it and just label it as like Ron Swanson or Ron Paul.
To let the Rons that took over the party and move it in that direction, to let them win.
Yeah,
basically.
exactly.
And there is an increasingly large leftist presence in the Libertarian Party.
Mm-hmm.
There's now a Libertarian Socialist Caucus, and their vice presidential nominee in 2020, Spike Cohen, he was out of that caucus.
Okay.
So the way their nominee was Jo Jorgensen for president, the only woman running for president in 2020, and she was a mainstream libertarian who actually had been the vice presidential candidate of the party in 1992.
Wow.
And so she was just like an old hand at the party that they gave it to.
Speaking of old hands, back to Mike Gravel.
I was saying something interesting.
Sorry.
And I wasn't even done. All right.
Okay, back to
Nope, I'm going to go back to Mike Gravel. We'll just leave that loose thread hanging.
Okay. Speaking of loose threads hanging.
Ooh.
Mike Gravel.
So, Mike Gravel kind of went to the wilderness after that. He's tried to do various reform movements to open up the political system and things like that, especially a lot of anti-war stuff. And basically what happened in 2020 was Chapo Trap House did an episode where they talked about Mike Gravel. And they talked about what a baller he is, I presume. Mm-hmm. And that inspired two high school kids to basically reach out to Mike Gravel and say, can we run a presidential campaign on your behalf, basically. And he said, sure, go for it. And it only lasted about 3 or 4 months because the condition was we're not going to do this if we can't get at the debates. Mm-hmm. And they couldn't get at the debates. So Gravel dropped out. He endorsed Bernie. And he endorsed Tulsi Gabbard to be Bernie's running mate. Mm. And...
Which, you know, Tulsi... A lot of smart people have liked Tulsi. And she... You know, on paper, she had a lot of good things going for her, and just was a weirdo.
I don't think Tulsi's any more problematic than most politicians. She's just problematic in a much weirder way.
Yeah.
Like, it's... Every politician, except for maybe a handful, have huge glaring issues.
Yeah.
They're just not stuff like grew up in a cult.
Yeah.
Or is a Hindu nationalist. Like, she's just problematic in a weirder way.
Yeah, but she also got erased from... They would always say, oh, Kamala's the first woman of color in the debate. And it's like, Tulsi's right there.
I think she was done dirty.
And they say, oh, Cory Booker is the first vegan on state. It's like, Tulsi's
she was
vegan.
the first Hindu to run for president.
Yeah.
Nobody cared about that. I definitely think that she's weird and she has serious issues policy-wise.
But it doesn't...
But I think that she was definitely minimized and done dirty, and I think that she is the victim of a lot of online groupthink about what to think about her. So
that doesn't reflect negatively on Gravel.
No, not at all, especially because Gravel's big thing is he's anti-war.
Yeah.
And, you know, Tulsi Gabbard was running like an anti-regime change platform. That's like her whole thing.
Yeah. Oh, and everyone was like, who was the veteran?
Oh, Buttigieg.
Like, Buttigieg is a veteran, and it's like
Tulsi's still a troop. She's actively a troop.
Actively a troop.
She had to like pause her campaign for a few weeks to go fulfill her basic training.
So that's
also,
a lot of shit
she's the same
got
age
done dirty.
as Pete Buttigieg, but everyone made it like, oh, he's the only millennial troop. And it's
fucking
like,
fuck Pete
It's
Buttigieg.
like there is a woman of color, millennial troop vegan, who is also a religious minority.
And she got
right
treated
here.
like she was just a full-on bigot.
Yeah, and
psycho.
she was literally called a Russian plant by like
Hillary
psychopaths
Clinton.
on Twitter. By Hillary Clinton. Yeah. Who's a psychopath on Twitter? So, I'm not a Tulsi.
Fellow podcaster, Hillary Clinton.
Our colleague, friend of the show.
Hey, come on the show, Hillary.
I'm not like a diehard Tulsi stan, but I still say justice for Tulsi. I think she was done dirty.
Fuck, okay.
But so Mike Gravel dropped out, and then the boys that were running his campaign set up the Gravel Institute, and then it just seems like Mike retired to his peaceful home in Seaside, California, up by like Monterey, and by all accounts passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 91.
So, let's we raise a glass in solidarity.
That's right. To Comrade Mike Gravel.
Yes.
A truly interesting and historic political figure, deserves to be remembered. Also, he had the single craziest campaign ad I've ever seen in 2008, where he just was standing in a park, and just stared at the camera for a while without speaking. No soundtrack, just wind. You can hear the wind. And then he goes over to a little pond and throws a rock in it and walks away, and it's the end of it.
What?
Yeah.
Did the rock represent gravel?
I think it's supposed to be that he's, causing waves. Like, he's he's causing ripple effects.
It's so fascinating how, like, a lot of the stuff Bernie was saying at the debates and in public, it was like, oh my God, no one's ever said this. And then you go back and see that Bernie has been saying this for so long.
Yeah.
And that 2008 clip is so illuminating, and it also makes me so mad that it's like, he's been saying this. Obviously, there have been lefties and progressives that have been fighting forever and trying to get people like him heard. Yeah. And great journalists like Cy Hirsch, who please Google him and read his new book.
We should actually do a Cy Hirsch episode and go through all the stuff that he's broken.
Yeah,
it's really great.
But it's crazy because it's also like, for every subject, it's like how for every subject there's a tweet from Trump.
Yeah.
It's like for every subject there's Mike Gravel and Bernie.
There's a clip of somebody saying it on stage at a debate. Because it goes back to before them. I mean, there's stuff that Jesse Jackson said, that Jerry Brown said, that Robert Kennedy said. Stuff that, like, in hindsight, it's like, fuck. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like, why didn't we do anything about this?
Why didn't we do any of that?
Yeah, we started watching the Bobby Kennedy documentary that's on Netflix, which is amazing.
Miniseries.
The footage is amazing, especially if you're like me, where you really only kind of knew about JFK. And, it really fills in a lot of gaps, and you worked with Cesar Chavez, right?
Yeah.
And you learn more about Cesar Chavez. But I mean, growing up in California, what I learned about Cesar Chavez was like, he was good,
Yeah, you get it. You sometimes get a day off for his birthday.
Exactly. So to just hear what Cesar Chavez was fighting for, to see Bobby Kennedy go from this, he still was a white privileged, super privileged guy.
Yeah. Well, he's Irish.
Okay. And to see him radicalized by the murder of his brother, by meeting people like Cesar Chavez, it's incredible. The murder of Martin Luther King.
Just a few months before his own.
And you just like, it's just like, fuck, like, these are the same exact issues that Bernie was talking about in 2020.
Yeah, and, I strongly recommend that.
And we're still compromising for people like Biden, which, better than Trump, but it's... So that documentary, we actually haven't finished it just because it's so heavy. And you just see this really sweet guy that, and I always grew up kind of like mad at the Kennedys because of what they represent and because of all the raping and killing of women.
Plus, you're from New York. You hate Boston stuff.
Yeah, but...
Well, your family's from New York.
But yeah, like just being like, why did this guy have to fucking get murdered. Why did? And same
So
with when
Hubert Humphrey could become president.
Yeah, and same with when you watch when we watch this Judas and the Black Messiah, which we just watched.
Great movie. Yeah.
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 So yeah, it's like we cannot forget Mike Gravel, and
That's right.
Yeah, go down a little. It's when we talk about the cult of personality with politicians, it's like we love Bernie and he's amazing, and AOC and like whatever, but we can't let that overshadow all those other amazing people.
Yeah.
As well as like the people in your community that have been fighting for those things. And that's what Mike Gravel would want.
Yeah. So, remember Mike Gravel, read about him, watch the Bobby Kennedy series.
It'll make you, all of that stuff will make you mad, but it'll make you more awoke.
On a similar note, for something that Luch hasn't experienced, but I recommend, read...
Peeing standing up?
Peeing
No, I
standing
do
up.
that all the time.
Oh, jeez. Read The Soul of the Democratic Party by, Fight for the Soul of the Democratic, something like that, by John Nichols. It's a book about Henry Wallace's 1948 presidential campaign. Henry Wallace is up there with Bobby Kennedy, Huey Long, William Jennings Bryan. For me, as people that should have been able to take control and change the direction of the country, and were stymied. Those are like my four biggest could have beens. Also, I guess for the other guys, Thomas Frank's The People Know talks about William Jennings Bryan a good amount. Plus, there's a good biography about him that I forget. And the T. Harry Williams biography of Huey Long is very good as well. Learn about these people in the past. They're important. We've all been fighting these fights for a very long time.
Yeah.
And we can learn a lot from the people that came before us.
Exactly. We don't have to give in to the short memory of the media and of politicians of trying to act like these things are new issues.
Yeah.
None of it's new. It might get repackaged, but whether it's civil rights in the name of queer rights, whatever, none of it's new.
None of it's new. And also, we don't need to fall into the idea that these are all team sports, right?
Yeah.
Mike Gravel is willing to criticize Obama and Hillary on that debate stage. We should be able to criticize people that are ostensibly on our side as well.
Yeah.
Principle first, not teams. So, Mike Gravel, R.I.P. Rest in presidency.
Yes.
So
Become the president of the afterlife.
That's right. So, now we should change what this says so I know how long it's gone. So now we should change gears
To
the skies.
sky gears.
So, I'll leave it up to you. Do you want to talk about some of the stories of presidents dealing with aliens first? Or do you want to talk about the UFO report first?
Let's talk about this UFO report, and then
great.
kind of we can go into the history of how the government has kind of talked to us about aliens and their own weird little shit.
Very seldom they talk to us about aliens. Okay, so the UFO report, as we talked about before, this was a mandate as part of the budget, like COVID budget bill that they passed a few months ago, was that by the end of June, there needed to be a government-wide report on UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomena. So, as Senator Marco Rubio said, this doesn't answer a lot of questions, but it is really interesting. So, they researched 144 sightings of UAPs over the last couple of years. Maybe
All military ones. Not
this is
like,
all military.
They don't really give a shit if some farmer sees a UFO or if we see a UFO.
Well, that's not in the purview of what they're studying.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, exactly. They're studying.
It's not considered legitimate unless to the government.
I mean, I wouldn't necessarily go that far.
Well, that's my editorial.
Okay, great.
And what Desert Oracle says too.
I'm sure it's the case, but I'm just on the focus on this was anything that the government has seen.
I know.
Was the request.
Yes.
They could be still doing secret investigations into civilian stuff.
Well, no, when civilians report it, they send men in
Men in
black
Black.
to erase
Right.
their memory.
Right. Like in that episode of The X-Files that I love so much.
Yes.
So there were 144 sightings.
Mm-hmm.
They, in the interest of trying to figure out what these were, they set up 5 categories of things they might be.
Salty, sweet, umami, acid, fat, heat. That's 6.
And those aren't all flavors either. So the first one is airborne clutter. So this is just like birds, trash,
Loose
satellites.
satellites,
Yeah, like just bullshit in the sky, basically.
Bullshit in the sky.
Bullshit in the sky.
There's some bullshit waiting in the sky.
Floating in the sky. Just want to get it in the right order.
Let all the children boogie.
So, airborne clutter was the first.
It's my band name.
Right. And then there's natural atmospheric phenomena. So this would be like ice crystals, moisture, thermal fluctuations. That
Aurora Borealis.
Sure, yeah. Anything that on the sensors might come up as something else, but isn't actually. U.S. government or U.S. industry developmental programs. So this would be stuff from the military or from private aerospace companies that they're developing. So anything domestic, basically. But real aircraft.
Yeah.
Foreign adversary systems. So drones, satellites, or
Tulsi Gabbard
aircraft.
flying Russian bots.
Right, correct. But yeah, from a foreign adversary.
Yeah.
Or other. Other includes aliens, transdimensional reptilians, ghosts.
Yeah.
So these are from November 2004 to March 2021. They researched 144 incidents reported by primarily Navy and Air Force pilots. 143 of them are other.
What's the one they proved?
There's one that they were able to determine was a large deflating balloon. All the rest, they have no idea what it is. So, what they are saying is part of why they don't know what it is because they don't have very good data. They didn't have much of a way to report incidents. Even when they didn't state one, a lot of airmen and soldiers just didn't want to.
Yeah.
They were embarrassed or freaked out. There was social pressure against it, so they just don't have high quality data.
Yeah, I mean, you don't want to be the one that's like, I saw a UFO, and they're like, you're fucking nuts.
So basically what the report is saying is like, now that we know about this stuff, and we don't know what it is, we're going to make sure that these planes and aircraft and ships that are recording these, that they have the right technology they need to pick up high quality data from these, and make sure that there is in place solid reporting infrastructure so that when they are seen, it's taken seriously and handled quickly.
Yeah,
so
unlike sexual assault in the military.
Exactly unlike that. So basically this is a statement of intention, saying this is what we're going to do in order to make the next installment of this more robust. But they can't explain 143 incidents. The United States government. Crazy. So 143 incidents that they can't explain.
So that was basically the entirety of this report.
Yeah, basically the entire thing. Now, obviously, there are some folks who say, well, how can you believe anything the military says about any of this? Which is a fair enough point, but at some point, I feel like the epistemological rejection of all authority just kind of becomes nihilism. At some point, you just have to work with what you got. You know, you have people that are just like, well, if you can't believe anything the government ever says, then it's like, what do you have to go on with anything then? That's just...
Yeah, and if they were trying to cover up, like, let's say they're not trying to distract the world because people don't really seem to care that much.
Yeah.
But
they would have had a much more explosive report if they were trying to distract everybody.
If it really was like, it turns out that Russia has basically their own amazing spaceships.
Yeah.
Then I don't know.
Yeah, I don't see this being like a fabricated report. Now, if there is evidence to suggest that it see, that's the thing when it comes to like this like epistemic nihilism, is like, if there is evidence to suggest that it's not true, I will hear it out, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not going to start from the position that everything I hear all the time is a lie.
Mm-hmm.
Just because that leads you into a very dark place where nothing is real and you can't trust anything, when like that isn't really borne out. Like the government does lie a lot. Everybody in power lies a lot. But I want to avoid, even though I'm skeptical of the government, I want to avoid getting into a place where, like you see with the Trump people, the Trump cultists, where like whatever the states say about Biden winning must be a lie.
Mm-hmm.
Where basically what I want to avoid, and what I suggest everyone try to avoid, is getting into this mindset where the truth of something is dependent on who says it.
Yeah.
And not what it is.
Yeah.
And so take it with a grain of salt, but skepticism is not the same as nihilism. So that's my recommendation for everybody dealing with this stuff. Be skeptical, take it with a grain of salt, look into what they're saying, look into their past, all of that, but avoid, and I'm saying this because this is such a widespread thing right now, where so many people have this mindset that if Fox News says it, it must be a lie.
Mm-hmm.
If CNN says it, it must be a lie. If the government says it, it must be a lie. If a company says it, it must be a lie.
Mm-hmm.
That's not how truth works, you know? So this, I don't see any reason to disbelieve right now. I will update that if I hear differently.
Did they list any criteria of like what like did they say like in the absence of observing anyone flying this craft, or in the absence of finding any materials?
No, they didn't actually. They basically just said anything that wasn't immediately identified. So we can infer from that that if they found materials that made it clear what it was, if they could ID what the craft was, then it wouldn't fall into that category of UAP.
Yeah.
And then
which doesn't mean they didn't find materials or they haven't seen other things that they haven't let us know, but they just
absolutely,
didn't
and it
mention
could still all fall into other. They did not go into the details of the other reports, the ones they can't identify. They didn't explain what they all were. So there could be all kinds of things that we don't know. One of them could have involved a gray alien with dreadlocks throwing up a shaka as he's flying by an aircraft carrier. We don't know. That's what we should focus on about the lack of our knowledge here.
Yes.
So, UFOs, they're real. Aliens, they're here. How do we know? Because of the many times the presidents have met with or spoken with aliens, according to some. Now, I'm an educator. I'm a public educator, and I'm recording this under my real name. So I need to make a disclaimer before we jump into this, which is that the standards of reporting for these stories are not my usual standards for things that I would teach or explain as fact.
Mm-hmm.
Which is to say, these are fun. Who knows? But a lot of them come from places like the National Enquirer. So, are we all good on that? Okay.
The National Enquirer, a magazine that publishes a lot of falsehoods, but also leaks a lot of genuine.
There are people that use the National Enquirer as a source, as an outlet for leaks. There are New York Post as well. Because again, the truth factor of something is not dependent on who says it.
Mm-hmm.
This first one is from the Washington Post, though. But it's a...
WAPO?
WAPO?
Does that mean white people?
Yeah.
Basically, yeah.
Horace Walpole. Horace White People. This is a story called Ike and the Alien Ambassadors from 2004. That's the
I like
source.
Ike.
I like Ike.
No.
So basically the idea, this much is true. February 20th, 1954. President Dwight Eisenhower is on vacation in Palm Springs, California. The Associated Press announces President Dwight Eisenhower has died of a heart attack in Palm Springs, California. Within a few hours, they have to set out a correction and say he didn't actually die of a heart attack, but he was rushed somewhere, mysteriously.
Oh my God.
I believe the story is that he had some kind of emergency surgery to remove a tooth or something, an oral surgery.
Mm-hmm.
But others suggest that he was actually whisked away to an airbase nearby, I believe Edwards Air Force Base in the Mojave Desert, where he met with the aliens. Now, the idea of this narrative in the narrative overall of aliens landing on Earth, interacting with powerful people, etc., is that in 1945, we dropped the bomb. 1947, Kenneth Arnold starts seeing UFOs. Now, the idea is that by 1954, less than 10 years after the aliens basically showed up and were keeping an eye on things, they had their parlay with the government that dropped the bomb, in which a truce was made. The story is that a truce was made. That aliens could observe and, if necessary, abduct, do research experiments, things like that, without being perturbed by the American government in exchange for powerful technology. So what happens in the decades after 1954? The personal computer revolution. The internet.
Cars.
Well, no, we had cars already.
No, the movie Cars.
Oh, right, the movie Cars came out. But everything from cable television to the personal computer to the internet all comes out within a couple decades of them. About 40 years. And so the idea basically is that...
With the space race.
Right, exactly. So the idea basically is that in exchange for allowing UFOs to peacefully continue their research on the U.S., Eisenhower got the technological leap necessary to enter us into the information age.
In exchange for our bodies.
Yeah, sold our bodies. So that's obviously true. Obviously happened. How else do you explain iPhones and podcasts and things?
I don't.
If not alien technologies. See, it's not just the pyramids that people say humans couldn't have invented. So that's the first one of these stories. The second, which does come from the National Enquirer, supposedly during Watergate. So we're flashing forward to 1973. Supposedly a CIA agent had a conversation with Richard Nixon, who said that he has spoken with and visited with the aliens that are held in captivity by the United States.
Nixon said that.
Nixon has, yes. That these are the same aliens that have landed before, Roswell, for example. Perhaps the same ones that Eisenhower met with, but there's at least one that he says that we held. He didn't use the word capture or captivity specifically. He made it clear that it was kept under its own accord, its own free will, but it is kept secret, kept safe. And Nixon was very freaked out about this. Now, a story in the National Enquirer in the 1980s, written supposedly by Jackie Gleason's widow, the star of The Honeymooners, right?
Oh, exactly. Yeah.
Said that Jackie Gleason, who was well known as a UFO enthusiast in his life, that he came home one day. That is louder than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
That he came home one day from some meeting in Florida, and he was pale as a ghost, looked terrified. And he poured himself a drink, slumped down into his chair, and his wife said, "Jackie, what happened? Why do you look so pale?" And he said, "Oh, well, this...
Straight to the moon.
Yeah, bang!
The
zoom.
aliens.
They're going to the moon." He said that Nixon showed him the alien. That he took him to a secret base in Florida, showed him the alien, and it freaked him out. Now, like with the Eisenhower thing, Nixon did indeed hang out with Jackie Gleason in Florida at this time. They did some sightseeing, apparently. Gleason was very interested in aliens. So, this is obviously true. This obviously happened. It's the next update
I believe
on our story. But now that's not the only president, those aren't the only presidents who've seen or interacted with UFOs. In 1969, nice. So a few years before this, a young man, a naval veteran, and engineer and farmer, was about to give a speech at a Lions Club meeting in Georgia. About 7:15 p.m., one of the guests called his attention to a strange object that was visible about 30 degrees above the horizon to the west of where he was standing. This is just from Wikipedia. This young gentleman described the object as being bright white and as being about as bright as the moon. It was said to have appeared to have closed in on where he was standing, but to have stopped beyond a stand of pine trees some distance from him. The object is then said to have changed color, first to blue, then to red, then back to white, before appearing to recede into the distance. Now this young man felt that the object was self-illuminated and not solid in nature. His report indicates that it was witnessed by about 10 or 12 other people and was in view for 10 to 12 minutes before it passed out of sight. A few years later, this gentleman said, "There were about 20 of us standing outside of a little restaurant, I believe, a high school lunchroom, and a kind of green light appeared in the western sky. This was right after sundown. It got brighter and brighter, and then eventually disappeared. It didn't have any solid substance to it. It was just a very peculiar looking light. None of us could understand what it was." And that young man was Jimmy Carter. He became governor of Georgia in 1971, 2 years after the incident. He reported it in 1973.
Wow.
3 years before he was elected president. There was never an explanation of what it was. And to this day, Jimmy Carter, very old man, still kicking, has no idea what it was. But several people saw it, including him. And I believe he is technically the only president to have officially seen a UFO on paper. Similarly, in 1993, Billiam Clinton becomes president. Billiam Jehoshaphat Clinton becomes president. And they go, Mr. President, what's the first thing you're going to do when you're in the president? And he goes, I'm going to ask about aliens and I'll let you know. He never let us know. But, you know, some of his high-ranking people were quite committed to this question, like John Podesta, who helped set up the Harry Reid Commission to look into it later. George W. Bush, to my knowledge, had no real interest in UFOs. Neither did Barack Obama. Trump said, we're going to look into it. We've got a lot of really good people, and they are looking into it, and it's going to go really well. He never announced anything, obviously, but he did start a new branch of the military in outer space, so
yeah,
who knows?
Yeah, I think Trump just said, like, I don't think they're real, but that'd be cool. He basically said something like that. Like,
I don't think so, but I'd love it to be true.
I just like, but I'd love it.
But frankly, I would love it. So
it's pretty damning.
So that's the history of recent presidents with UFOs since the beginning of the modern UFO era in 1947.
Yeah, and I think we mentioned in the last episode the people asking Joe Biden, like, Barack Obama says that...
Basically, he said, like, Barack Obama doesn't know what the UFOs are, and Biden was like, you should ask him again.
So that's my favorite Biden moment ever.
Yeah.
Besides all of his brain farts. This is my favorite actual moment.
Yeah. This one and...
This and extending the unemployment.
He's done some okay stuff, actually. Yeah. I also did like when he told Trump to shut up. I think that was funny at the debate. Yeah. That was cathartic. So, that's Aliens Part 2.
Wow. I mean, it's even crazy, you know, your conservative grandpa, he was like, so... aliens are real, right? Like, yeah. A lot of people are kind of reading the news and just kind of like, I guess it's true. But it goes to show with how disillusioned and kind of powerless a lot of people feel that it's just kind of like, okay, like we can't really get excited about it. We also can't get like afraid of it because we just are like...
We just don't know what it is.
And it just feels so disconnected from our actual life.
Yeah.
Despite there being, which we talked about in the last episode, countless, you know, citizen reports in clusters where the same people are seeing the same thing in the sky. But yeah, it's still just kind of like, okay, what does this mean for me? How does this help my student loans?
That's right.
But it's also
they're
like...
They're going to come down and they're going to erase their student loans.
They're going to, like, zap it.
Yeah.
So, I guess just look to the skies.
The truth is out there. Trust no one.
Is there a Men in Black phrase? Who are you gonna call?
That's Ghostbusters.
Did I say Men in Black?
No, I think you said Men in Black, but
Okay.
I like Men in Black. Hey, buddy. Men in Black, what do they say? They just use the neuralizer. They don't really say anything.
Yeah, I was thinking of other Will Smith catchphrases.
Yeah, welcome to Earth.
Welcome to Earth, aliens.
Aliens, welcome to Earth.
Or if you're in Australia, welcome to Perth. I think I've already
Or
made that
Scotland.
joke before. Yeah.
I think that we're done.
I think we need one more alien expression.
Gleep, my glorp.
All right, from A Chicken in Every Pod.
Gleep, my glorp.
Good night and
And
good
good
glorp.
Good glorp. Good night and good glorp. Gleep, my glorp. Gleep it.
You're gonna gleep your glorps. Bang zoom straight
That's
to
what
the
I
moon.
want. I want you to gleep it. Ooh. Chicken Every Pot After Dark.
Go gleep yourself.
Go.